can talk a little bit more about Medicaid waivers. That was on my mind because of seeing what the waiver can do, even as adults. Because oftentimes parents say, well, you know, do they age out of the waiver? Meaning, is that, you know, when they're 18, are they no longer eligible, or that type of thing? And no, when they're 30, when they're 40, they can still be enjoying waiver services that can help make semi-independent living possible. So we can touch on a little bit of waivers. Anything else? Guardianship. I don't know if your children are getting anywhere close to that point. That's really as you approach age 18 type of thing. And most of your kids here are.
We have a full range. Our youngest is 2. Our oldest is 21.
Wow. Okay. Okay.
We're set up a little bit different than the.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, most of the time my son's older than all the kids, so I've got one even older than that. So we can touch base on guardianship as well while we're together this evening.
Special needs trusts.
Okay. Yes, we will. We'll talk about special needs trusts, and also if you've heard about the ABLE Act, that's. Okay, and we can touch base on what it is and what it isn't. There's some misunderstanding or misinformation out there, partially because in the 7 years it took to hatch from an idea to actually passing Congress, it changed. So we'll talk about that, and if we understand what it is, then it actually can be useful, but it's not going to be an end-all, and it certainly isn't going to take the place of the Special Needs Trust. So there's that.
So that's an Indiana specific act?
Well, no, it's federal. However, the plans are going to be state specific.
Okay.
Similar to 529, like for college savings.
That's kind of what I likened it to. That's what I likened it to. It was almost like a 529.
Similar from a tax standpoint. Well, we'll just talk about the ABLE Act right now. That's fine. Anybody running into the parking lot, they're going to miss.
So we're videotaping you.
Oh, that's. About this time, my wife says, "Don't quit your day job." Is that on tape? Oh well. So with the ABLE Act, passing Congress just a few months ago, it will create when the various states implement it, and the states are not required to. We're hopeful that things will get rolling, and that the states will. But what it's going to do is it's going to create the opportunity for an individual with disability or special needs to have, in essence, like an accumulation or an account of sorts to build up some funds that they may need for a purchase. What makes it powerful is that where there are government benefits involved, such as the Medicaid waivers that we were just talking about, or Medicaid, or perhaps SSI, there is an asset ceiling that they have to maintain in order to be continually eligible. And that's because the government sees these benefits or resources as kind of a safety net of last resort, and therefore if there are any other resources that could be used beforehand, then the government expects that to be the case. So there's a $2,000 ceiling in Indiana, and that's the maximum amount that an individual with special needs who is accessing or plans to access Medicaid, SSI, Medicaid waiver services, and some other benefits, that's it. You have to be under $2,000. And that's not per month or per year, that's total, period. So that includes checking, savings, and this is, again, speaking of your child, not you, but checking, savings, government bonds, maybe the grandparents keep purchasing. If there are any UTMA, Uniform Transfer to Minor Act accounts, or custodial accounts, guardian accounts, mutual funds or savings accounts in their name. Typically the key is does their name appear in the registration, and or is the account utilizing their Social Security number. So those are usually the indicators that this individual is tied to this account. Do you see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Either the name of the minor, the child, appears in the registration, often again with language such as CUST for custodian or custodian, UTMA for Uniform Transfer to Minor Act account, that type of thing. Or their Social Security numbers used, which you would know about a 1099 that's generated from the account. Again, any of those indicate that they're attached to the account And that's problematic with regards to maintaining eligibility for benefits. Now, the reason that many people get into trouble is because in many quote-unquote middle-class households, parents' assets or income block eligibility for the child, and therefore there are not a lot of supports and help in the way of government benefits while they're young. And the extent to which many parents find some level of support is through the Medicaid waiver, and so they reach out to the BEADS office, the Bureau of Developmental Disability Services, which, depending upon where you're at, if you're Marion or surrounding counties, would be at Keystone and Kessler in Indianapolis. Otherwise, there are BEADS offices scattered around the state, typically with anywhere from about 6 to 8 counties attached to each BEADS office. Anyone outside of Boone, Hendricks, or Marion, or any of the donut counties? Anyone further out than that?
In Hamilton?
Mm-hmm, right. So Hamilton, Boone, Hendricks, all the donut counties around Marion. So Marion and all surrounding counties, all contiguous counties. The only exception is Madison, and it's technically not contiguous. It kind of comes down close. But everything but Madison and central Indiana is out of the Indianapolis Bureau of Developmental Disability Services office. They manage the waivers. And so as parents, we may have placed our child in the queue or on the waiting list, so they will eventually be targeted for a Medicaid waiver. And if the primary diagnosis is being on the spectrum and or developmental or intellectual disability, then the family supports waiver is the waiver that you're wanting to pursue. Family supports waiver, otherwise known as the FSW. And that waiver has a fairly short wait, and it is well worth pursuing. At this point, I think the average wait is between 2 and 3 years, which compared to 10 plus years that we were experiencing as recent as 3 years ago for waivers. So the wait's pretty short. It's kind of like you blink and it'll be here. So the sooner your child's placed in the queue, the sooner they're going to come up. And they can be placed early, so you can get them on the list when they're 4, 5, 6 years old, having time count for you. So for many of our families, there are no other government benefits besides getting your child in the queue for the Medicaid waiver. And to place them on the waiting list, there's typically no vetting relative to assets or income. But when they are targeted for the waiver, 2, 3 years later, this type of thing, then after the BEADS office, again this is the Bureau of Developmental Disability Services, BDDS office that manages the waivers, after they evaluate and approve them for waiver services, then as a parent you are released to go to the FSSA office in your respective county. Now while the BEADS office serves Marion and all contiguous counties, there is a Medicaid or an FSSA, which stands for Family Social Services Administration office in each county. So based on whatever your resident county is, after your child's targeted for the waiver, approved for waiver services, and you're assigned a caseworker, then you can go to the Medicaid office and you can apply for Medicaid for your child, and that's disability Medicaid. Under normal circumstances, the Medicaid office would look at your assets and income and say your child's not eligible. But if you're going to the Medicaid office at the request of the BEADS office because they've been targeted for a Medicaid waiver, then that's a part of what's waived, meaning the Medicaid office waives the requirement that the family meet a financial guideline. And so you can have a child on disability Medicaid while the parents, have income, assets, etc. And that can be helpful with regards to medical issues because primary would continue to be a group health insurance, but the Medicaid, disability Medicaid coverage they have would be secondary, picking up on deductibles, co-pays, out-of-pockets, this type of thing. So in some cases, some parents will have a high deductible plan once their child's on disability Medicaid, so they enjoy a lower premium for the health coverage, knowing that Medicaid is going to pick up on whatever the health plan does not cover. At any rate, you eventually you're charged target. Now, when you get to the Medicaid office, they will waive that requirement for the parents. So despite a parent's assets or income, your child can be actually approved for disability Medicaid, again, if they've been targeted for a waiver. However, if your child has $2,000 or more in a savings account, government bonds, UTMA, custodial, these various things that we've mentioned, accounts that are attached to them. If they have $2,000 or more, then the Medicaid office will turn them down. And as a result of that, their waiver will not be funded, because Medicaid funds the waiver. So as a general rule, it's not a good idea to accumulate assets in the name of or associated with the Social Security number of a child with special needs. Sooner or later, information on that sees the light of day, and if it's a part of working with a government agency, it's probably not going to turn out well. Any questions on that? Yes?
What if, it's a morbid thing to think about, with my wife's grandmother, what if she leaves money for her grandchildren, my 3 daughters, in a trust, and was supposed to when they're 18 or 19 or when they graduate college? How would that be affected with?
Okay, so the question is let's say it's not their money yet, but let's say someone passes away, and in their estate plan, they've made a provision, for grandchildren or this type of thing. And grandparents participating in the special needs planning process is becoming more common because grandparents are living longer, and they're seeing grandkids grow up into being adults. And so there's a relationship that goes beyond, the little tykes that run around and get in the way and this type of thing, and there's more of a relationship. So as a result, sometimes grandparents, in revisiting their estate plans, decide they want to do something for grandkids. And sometimes it's just sprinkling, taking so much money and sprinkling among all the living grandchildren. That's very common. Just setting aside X number of dollars, $25,000 or $50,000 to be divided up among, or they call it sprinkling among all the living grandchildren at the time of their death. Now, there are a couple of different ways that inheritances can be handled. One is where they're not even mentioned by name. It's just we have so many dollars and they're going to be divided up among all the living grandkids. The reason that that's popular is because not in all cases does the grandparent know how many grandchildren there's going to end up being, and they don't want to have to run back to the attorney and spend a couple $100s every time another grandchild is born. So the easier way to handle it is just divide it by however many there are. Okay, and so that has become increasingly common. The problem with that, the problem with not naming the grandchildren, that is, no respect to them individually or the unique circumstance under which any of them may live, you can end up, even without a trust situation, you can end up with monies being inherited by a child with special needs. Does everyone see what I'm saying? Okay. And when they inherit, then that money becomes theirs. And so then you have a resource issue with the $2,000. And so that can complicate their continued eligibility for benefits. Especially with the Medicaid waiver, you may wait 2 or 3 years for them to become eligible for the Medicaid waiver. If they exceed the $2,000 resource limit, then the state will cut them off the following month. So the state is much quicker to cut them off than they are to grant them benefits. Now, that's one way this happens. That is, the inheritance occurs because just kind of blindly money is left to be divided up among the grandkids. Again, remember, it only takes $2,000, so no one has to be wealthy to create a problem with this. The second way in which this may happen is the grandparents, probably working with an attorney, maybe have some sort of trust situation set up. Trust situation for their children or for grandchildren, etc. And we see a lot of different types of plans. There are education trusts where a grandparent has set up a trust for grandkids for the express purpose of being used for higher learning, this type of thing, trying to invest in future generations, etc. We see other trusts that are just designed to benefit the grandkids, but to perhaps make them wait a little while, meaning instead of they're getting it immediately, maybe something when they turn 18, 21, 25, or 30, this type of thing. So the grandparent may be long gone, but the grandchild is reminded perhaps once or twice or 3 times by a string of gifts following a schedule. And that's pleasing to the grandparent to think that they're kind of reminding, of their existence, because we all, I guess, are somewhat concerned that after we leave, that we'll kind of be forgotten. And so it's a neat thing to do that. It may or may not be a problem to answer what's your first name?
Jared.
Jerry?
Jared.
Jared, okay. So Jared, it may or may not be a problem depending upon the way the planning has been done.
Okay.
If it is just what we would call a minor's trust, meaning a trust for minors and underage or underaged individuals, or just a family trust, and in essence there is a single trust to serve for a group of trust beneficiaries, okay, then that trust may not address the special needs issues of the one grandchild. Are you with me?
Yes.
Okay. Because when we deal with a class of beneficiaries for a trust, the class being all my grandkids, a group in essence, and there's no individual attention, then there's an increased likelihood they're all being painted with the same brush. Am I making sense?
Yes.
Okay. And in the process of doing that, it's unlikely to provide the insulation needed to preserve their eligibility for benefits. Okay? Because if they're treated like all the other grandkids, not singled out for special attention, not of a negative nature,
Yeah.
but the type of special attention that will insulate them from losing very valuable government benefits, then that protection may not be there. The good news is that, in my experience, probably 99% of situations are fixable. And it's a matter of looking at what has been done, kind of like, here's where we're at, this is where we need to be, and then looking at how we can get to that point. And the planning that we do often involves, multi-generational planning, and that's wonderful because it indicates that other individuals beyond the parents alone are interested, engaged, wanting to help, etc. So we would need to look at the trust and determine how it is set up, and through that determine if there's, protection for the child with special needs relative to what's in that trust, or their share of what's in that trust being considered an available resource in blocking ongoing eligibility for benefits. And if it's not there, then chances are there's a way to fix it so they can be protected. Okay. Well, welcome everyone. And perhaps we have most of who are going to have. So we'll kind of formally get started here. First of all, I want to thank everyone for coming out. I really appreciate it. It's a beautiful evening, and it'd be so tempting to be out in the yard or at some soccer game or who knows what. So I appreciate your taking your time, and certainly my goal to have you leave this evening feeling as though it was a worthwhile investment of your time, and that you've learned a lot in your journey to advocate for your child or children with special needs. My name is Gordon Holmes, and professionally I'm a certified financial planner. Personally, I'm the parent of a child on the spectrum. I have a son, Matthew. He's 19. He'll be 20 next month, in about a month. And he's high-functioning autism, or Asperger's, depending upon who you're reading or what camp you're in. And in addition to that, he has learning disabilities. He's dyslexic, has central auditory processing, attention deficit, obsessive-compulsive tendencies, and these, of course, kind of relate to being on the spectrum. And then in addition to that, at the age of 15, he was diagnosed with a very severe case of Crohn's disease and promptly blew out his small intestines. Spent 3 months in the PICU fighting for his life. And what was interesting is prior to that, we could not have imagined any challenge that would supersede our focus on his being on the spectrum. But I got to tell you, when you've got 14 IV pumps going and 9 specialists trying to keep a kid alive, and more tubes and wires coming out of him to make your medical shows on TV look like somebody's got the flu, you're not thinking as much about what the spectrum is doing. And so the good news is that we with great medical care, we working with everyone. He survived that, which is huge. And we actually had the pleasure of returning to concerns about being on the spectrum, which was a happy day. So he's complicated, as so many kids with special needs are, and we kind of rotate from one issue to another. And I say we, but it's primarily my wife and his mom. I think moms of kids with special needs are amazing, incredible. And I know that Alice is just amazing. I don't know if any of you have had this experience, but just gaining a profoundly higher and or greater depth of respect for your spouse and your helpmate by seeing, you know, what they do or through the special needs experience. And I'm so grateful. Literally, he probably would not be alive if not for her. So, but about 15, 16 years ago, after having been in practice quite a while already, I really felt led to move my practice in the direction of special needs and to help other families deal with you know, some of the legal, financial, and government benefit issues as we were having to in our journey. Started out as something small, just kind of as the need arose, but pretty quickly there were requests to speak and share and to help more families. And so over the years, it pretty much encompasses the entire state of Indiana now, out of offices both in Indianapolis and have an office in Louisville. And over the last 15, 16 years, we've probably assisted somewhere around 3,000 families in the special needs planning process. So statewide, by the grace of God, we've kind of become the go-to. And so we have families that come in from all over the state to work with us. We have strategic alliances with attorneys to deal with everything from Social Security appeals, Medicaid administrative hearings, guardianship issues, putting together estate planning documents, setting up special needs trusts, etc. We provide trust management, trust asset management services for families to manage assets that are placed in a trust, and helping families put together the infrastructure for the future of these very special individuals. So that's just a little bit of my background. What I'd like to do is briefly walk through the items that you have in your folders, and we do have a PowerPoint presentation to go through this evening. And to make sure I keep on track, Sarah, what are we thinking time-wise to wrap?
I gave it 6 to 8 p.m.
Okay.
So
Right.
if it's
We
a
can
little
do that.
shorter than
Yeah.
that, that's fine too.
Yeah. Well,
but,
I think
that's the time.
I think we can have you out here before 8, so that'll be a good thing, and I appreciate you being so generous with the time. In your folders, the little kid on the brochure there that you see, okay? That little kid, his name is Ben, and he lives in Hamilton County. Cutest kid. And I just love that picture, that sense of optimism and hope. And when I look at that, every time I look at that picture, I'm just reminded that our kids with special needs put their hope in us. And that's what I see with those big eyes and those clasped hands. You know, he's putting his hope in us. So I see that as the nature of our practice, trying to help honor that faith that the kids put in us. If you'll open up the brochure, inside it there's a list of my staff. We have a wonderful team that helps support our efforts throughout Indiana. And then if you further open it, I think you'll see a picture of the family. There's Matt in the middle. And a bit of a narrative of my personal journey. And on the right, there's a list of just a smattering of some of the nonprofits and organizations that we work with. Between support groups and the nonprofits, ABA centers and schools and special needs co-ops, we maintain and support somewhere close to 200 special needs organizations throughout Indiana and Kentucky. On the back side, my office locations. I have an office at Keystone at the Crossing, so very close, and then also the office that's in Louisville. Just moved the office here in Indianapolis. We were in Castleton, so we're a little closer to you at Keystone at the Crossing, a new location there, more conference rooms for meeting with families and so forth, so it's a great spot. I have a website also that's listed there. Feel free to visit that. There's newsletters and other helpful information on the website. Also in your folders, there's the pumpkin-colored booklet. It's a resource piece helpful to families that have a dependent with special needs. Easy to read language and comfortable, easy to carry size. So just put it in your pocket or purse or whatever, and while you're sitting there during an OT or speech or handwriting without tears or waiting for an IEP meeting or I don't know. I could probably go on, but won't. Just pull it out and give it a read, and I think you may find the information in there helpful. Also, you've got the page in your folders with a slide at the top of it, and that's all about the workshops that we do. If you know of another organization that would benefit parent group or something from the information that we covered this evening. Feel free to pass that page along to them. Again, a summary of what information I'm able to cover, contact information, etc. We work with a number of churches that have a special needs ministry, as an example, and again, other schools and organizations. So always happy to come. There's never a charge for me to speak. I'm delighted to come and to share. In a year, I think in a given year, I'll speak to anywhere from about 75 to 100 groups. So they keep me running, which is wonderful. A few things I enjoy more than this, being here with you. Also in your folders, there's an evaluation form, and if you'd be kind enough to pull that out. Oh, while you're doing that, there's also a newsletter in there. We distribute the newsletter on a quarterly basis, and I'll be pleased to add you to the distribution list and explain how we do that. And if you're missing the newsletter, I apologize. We were between issues and not all folders got one, but we'll be happy to start emailing that to you. It's on a quarterly basis. We did a recent one on the ABLE Act, in fact, and that was requested quite a lot. And we'll try to take a minute here in a little bit and talk a little bit more about the ABLE Act. But the evaluation form. The evaluation form is important for several reasons, and it's why I brought pens this evening. You'll want to complete that. There's a comment section at the bottom. That's your opportunity to report information that you feel it may be helpful for me to know about your situation. Halfway up, there's a list of topics that we're going to touch on as we go through the PowerPoint presentation. And I encourage you to check off items that you would like to develop further or want additional information on. To finish on time this evening, we may not go into as much depth as you'd like, and we do want to be faithful at following up on areas of interest. Above that, there's a place with information on the kids, those with and without special needs. That gives me a sense of family dynamics. Are you a family with 6 kids and 2 with special needs? And like a gal I met with this afternoon from Richmond, Indiana at the office, and they have 1 child with special needs, and she was almost 40 when the child came, and she said, we worked for 10 years to get the kid, and she's like, he's got special needs, you know, but we're just so excited to have a baby, you know, and so forth. She said, we'll deal with it. Oh well. Again, it gives me a sense of where also you're at in your journey, because I know from personal experience that concerns are very different if your child is 3 or 4 versus if they're 19 like my Matthew, and where you're at in your journey is huge in terms of how we can be helpful. Let's see. Also, as a result of being here this evening, I'll be pleased to extend to you a free follow-up consultation in the office at Keystone at the Crossing. There's no charge. We set aside 90 minutes of time for each family, and we drill deep into the areas that we touch on this evening. And families come in from all over the state to take advantage of that. I've been known to call the waiver office, call Social Security. I mean, right in the meeting. We get to it. We really make the time count for you. Your information on the evaluation form enables us to be faithful in reaching out to you to schedule that free follow-up consultation. Also, during the consultation, we can work on your application for the waiver. As an example, I keep those on hand. So it's whatever needs attention in your situation. We get busy with it in that free individual consultation, and then determine what are some appropriate next steps. So again, the information you record on the evaluation form will enable us to be faithful in reaching out to you in follow-up. Secondly, that's how the newsletter list has grown. And so by completing the evaluation form, we'll add you to the distribution list. And we cover topics that are a little off the beaten path, and so we get a lot of favorable feedback, and they're easy to read newsletters. It's the front and back of 1 page, so it's a quick read. Last but not least, one of the last things we're going to do this evening is we're going to do a drawing. And I brought the goodie bag. Now, the goodie bag is not just any bag. It happens to be my wife's favorite place to shop. And did you know at the big service center they sell it by the pound, not the bags, the stuff, you know. And I better stop because I'm on video. I'm going to say too much and get myself in trouble. I love you, dear. Okay. At any rate, I brought some items in the bag. And so what I thought we'd do is at the tail end, we'll have you finish up your evaluation forms, fold them in half, pass them in, and we'll pluck out evaluation forms and we'll move the merchandise. And we brought some fun stuff. I've got a couple of Snoopies. Okay, usually had one, but found an extra. So we'll find a new home for our couple of Snoopies. Okay, trying not to get in the way of that. I have a new item that I was showing Amanda. This is brand new. And there's a carabiner inside, so you can hook it to your belt, that type of thing. And that's a Snoopy water bottle. The kids go crazy over that. And had a parent at the last workshop said, forget the kids. They want the water bottle. I'm like, okay. I brought a bunch of t-shirts, and they're always a hit with the Snoopy on it. The kids love those. So we got all kinds of different sizes and so forth. So that's cool. And a couple of our bags like this, with the Snoopy on it. So at any rate, what we'll do at the end, we'll ask you to finish up your evaluation forms, fold them in half, and we'll start pulling out the stuff. And I'd say the good news for you is, unless we get a stampede of people at the last minute, your odds are looking pretty good. All right, welcome. Your dependent with special needs, making their future more secure. Is the caretaker or someone that's looking after a child of any age, young or adult, that has special needs. You're advocating for them, obviously, that's why you're here. But the question that looms heavy for us is what happens when you're not around. And I know in my personal journey, my wife had a near fatal auto accident about 15 years ago, and I had a serious auto accident January 6th of 2011. And so we've each had a couple of brushes with doing this alone. And it really does kind of shake you up, because if there are two parents focused on a child with special needs, you lean on each other. It's like the tag team, And the thought of going it alone is a challenge, and my heart always goes out to single parents of children with special needs, because I know my wife and I, on a couple of occasions, have said, I'm not doing this alone, and so. But the question is, if something happened and you were no longer there, then what plan is in place, or how is that going to work? Studies that we've done have shown that about 1 in 5 families has done serious special needs planning. About 1 in 5. This is a part of my passion because the need is huge. There are some real reasons, and by the way, that was 2011, and hopefully the numbers improved. The first study we did was about 10 years prior to that, and it was at 11%. So we're moving the number up, which is positive, but a long way to go. But what are the things that hold us back as a special needs community from planning? What things come to mind that you think may keep someone from planning this way?
I think just not knowing what to plan for. Not knowing where your child's going to be, especially if they're young, where they're going to be in 10 years, knowing what resources are available in your community to plan for. That's a lot of the questions that we get.
Okay.
You might get questions around, there's a lot of resources that are necessary now, which makes it difficult to have resources.
Absolutely. So we've got the trying to figure out the future. We have resources issues. Also, special needs planning is complicated. I know when I started moving my practice in that direction 15, 16 years ago, I thought, I've been in practice for a while. I know a few things. This will be a quick study, and I'll be up and going. And I have to tell you, 15, 16 years later, I'm still studying. When you overlay government issues and legal issues, financial issues, tax issues, special needs issues, all this, it's a lot. And so I'm constantly on conference calls, going to symposiums, having breakfast meetings with attorneys and so forth, as we truly seek to do the very best we can to serve the families. To a certain degree, in the autism community, one of the questions is, kind of how is this whole thing going to turn out? And the more parents you talk to, the more varied outcomes you find. And so there's that issue of just how predictable, is it? That type of thing. I know our journey with Matthew has been inspiring as to what he's been able to accomplish from the early days. And we're so grateful for all the people that have have impacted him so positively. But there is that issue of crystal ball, as I call it, how everything's going to turn out. To determine if additional planning may be appropriate in your situation, we have 3 questions on the screen. The first is, have you left more than $2,000 to your dependent with special needs in your will or trust? Children with special needs are generally expensive. There's an element of cost involved. I know now ABA is a substantial cost. Fortunately, under the autism mandate, in many cases you can get some support, some help with that. 16 years ago, it was OT and speech and a variety of other things. ABA wasn't as much on the front and center like it is now, and it's a wonderful benefit that is available now. But early on, it costs a lot. So the question there is, have you arranged to provide for them, since there's expense involved? And number 2, have you identified a care provider? Meaning, if you're not there, someone who's going to step up and take care of them. And number 3, for many of us, most of what we will leave if something happens to us is in the form of life insurance or retirement plan assets. And so the question deals with the beneficiary. For a number of families I meet with, beneficiaries are not always up to date. In fact, occasionally we'll find that no beneficiary is listed, or perhaps it doesn't reflect the last child or 2 that's come along because the policy was set up 10 years ago, but we've had a child or 2 since, and there was the intention to reach out and update that stuff, but life's busy, especially if you have a dependent with special needs, and so forth, or maybe you weren't sure what to do, and so you just kind of left it alone, etc. So, but with these 3 questions, I'm interested in your thoughts on these. Yes? No? Okay, we got 2 no's and a yes. Anybody else going to be brave?
Yeah, first one yes, and third one yes. You don't know.
Okay. Okay, these 3 questions largely embody the great divide in planning for families, based on whether you have a child with special needs or not. So these are not random questions. They're actually carefully selected and carefully worded to actually solicit a yes answer, or to put you in the mode of, boy, I sure wish I could answer yes to all of those questions. But in reality, answering yes to any of those questions spells trouble potentially ahead. And this is because when you attach that big red caboose with blue letters across it that says special needs to your train, all the answers change. And that means if, as a special needs community, we go about planning like our neighbors are and like everyone else does, the results could actually be disastrous. We have a whole different set of rules to go by, and we're actually going to take these questions one at a time, and we'll talk about why having a child with special needs changes that dynamic, changes the answer. Okay. All right, and there you see the little girl looking at the storm clouds on the horizon. Surprise, answering yes to any of the questions, potential trouble, or storms ahead. We're going to look at things from a legal and a financial perspective this evening. What's significant about this slide is that when it comes to special needs planning, it requires a collaborative effort between the financial and legal side. That is, an attorney that has a high level of expertise in special needs, and someone on the financial side with expertise in special needs as well. And they work together as a team collaboratively to help your family in the special needs planning process. Regardless of how credible an attorney is, without addressing the financial side of special needs planning, the legal side, the financial side will undermine the legal side if it's not addressed collaboratively. And the same thing with financial. If you've got a good financial person, they tell you what to invest in and when to make changes or adjustments, and you're very pleased with, with the service you're receiving, but you've not addressed the legal side of special needs planning, your financial gains are for naught. Realizing this 15 years ago, we went about developing strategic alliances with attorneys throughout Indiana and Kentucky that have a high level of expertise and a heart for special needs. And we have maintained these relationships over the years, and as a result of that, we're able to provide comprehensive services for families and to see that that's done while respecting your resources. Because the cost of special needs planning out there is all over the board. It's a supply and demand issue. And part of our role is to protect the families. Let's start on the legal side. Wills, trusts, and guardianships we'll touch on. As far as wills are concerned, what motivates most of us to get a will? Why do we need a will? We're not doing so good on the audience participation. Help me out, please.
Let your wishes be known after you.
Absolutely. The term will, that's your intent. How you see things. It's your word. Right, absolutely. So if it was important enough for you to buy it, move it from house to house, put it in the basement, the attic, the garage, argue with your spouse over it, whatever your stuff is, it's important enough to have a say as to who gets it when something happens to you. Absolutely. Okay. Also, your will addresses something really precious. And we'll see how quick the prints leave when there's no more money. Yeah. So trusts have become so popular in that regard. And with having a trust, you get to pick the trustee. That's the person that you put in charge of whatever you're going to leave to a trust. And generally, anything a person can own, a trust can own. So a trust can own a business, can own property, investments, retirement assets. A lot of different things can be held by a trust. All right. Oh, by the way, one thing I did not mention when we were talking about wills is what happens if you die without one. If you die without a will, assets pass in a variety of ways. Some assets will pass by beneficiary. Usually that's life insurance and retirement accounts. Some assets will pass by ownership, because at the time of your death, if you are legally married and you hold property jointly with your spouse, then generally that will automatically pass to the surviving spouse. What comes as a surprise to some people is what happens with individually held assets if you don't have a will. Individually held assets would include maybe a piece of rental property that you either bought or maybe inherited. Perhaps you owned a house before you married and decided, well, we'll just keep that house and we'll turn it into a rental. Or maybe you have a family member living in that house, not paying rent. Wish they were. All kinds of various situations. Perhaps your spouse has their own bank account. You might have a situation where one or both of you were married previously. And there's that sense of your own identity, and each of you kind of maintain some of your own accounts and business affairs, this type of thing. Well, in the absence of estate planning and having a will, at the time of your death, those assets are subject to probate, meaning assets that are individually held. And the reason for that is because there's no instruction on that asset, meaning it wasn't jointly held, which says it goes to the remaining person. Everyone see what I'm saying? Yeah. And so what happens is state law has provisions for how to handle that. So the state steps in